and welcome to the broadcast special on occasion of World Ozone Day 2022. My name is Jessie Leonce from the Department of Sustainable Development. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are live on air coming to you from Castries. We are celebrating not only World Ozone Day, but also the Montreal Protocol, 35 years in existence, the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. We'd like to thank you so much for watching. We hope you could stay tuned throughout the program to learn a little bit about the Montreal Protocol, the ozone layer, as well as some of the work, the interventions that have been done, everything that has been accomplished to date in terms of ozone recovery. This morning we have a tight schedule, a packed schedule. We have in studio quite a few persons, experts in the field of ozone recovery, substances that deplete the ozone layer, the work that has been happening specifically in St. Lucia. And we want to, before we get to that, I just want to go to a quick video, just to give you a quick run through about the Montreal Protocol, the 35th anniversary of this treaty, giving you some insight before we get into the nitty-gritty of its significance. So take a look and we'll take it from there.
35 years ago, one of the most successful environmental agreements was adopted, the Montreal Protocol. Scientists had discovered chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, everyday gases used in fridges, air conditioners, insulating foams, and spray cans, were creating a hole in our ozone layer. If CFCs were to continue to be emitted into the atmosphere unchecked, the ozone layer would have been destroyed, and that would have been catastrophic for life on Earth. You see, the ozone layer is a shield that protects us, the crops, and all nature around us, even building materials, from the harmful and damaging effects of the sun's UV radiation. Scientific evidence painted a grim future for mankind if this shield were to disappear. Increased cases of skin cancer, irreparable damage to nature, to life on land and underwater, including plants and animals for our food. Luckily, world leaders came together and collaborated to find a solution. The Montreal Protocol was adopted to ban these harmful ozone-depleting substances, and 35 years on, the ozone layer is slowly recovering. But did you know? Ozone-depleting substances are also greenhouse gases. By banning these harmful substances, the Montreal Protocol also helped reduce the impact of global warming. Protecting our trees and plants from excessive UV radiation exposure for the past 35 years also helped safeguard the Earth's carbon sink and reduce the amount of carbon dioxide released in our atmosphere, slowing down global warming up to 1 degree Celsius. But the ozone story isn't over yet. We need to continue protecting the ozone layer and the environment. Countries that ratify the protocol's Kigali Amendment commit to phasing down potent climate-warming hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs, that is estimated to avoid up to 0.4 degrees Celsius of global warming by the end of the century. The Kigali Amendment also encourages countries to adopt more ozone and environmentally friendly sustainable cooling technologies. A big win for mankind and nature. On this 35th World Ozone Day, we celebrate the contribution the Montreal Protocol has made in protecting life on Earth, now and into the future.
That was a brief public service announcement there on the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol, and a little bit on the Kigali Amendment toward the end there. If you're just joining us, a special good morning to you. We are live on NTN, bringing you a broadcast special on World Ozone Day today, the 16th of September 2022. We thank you so much for joining us. We're now moving on to our first interview of the morning, and I would like to hand over to my colleague, Ms. Cleopatra Anthony, and she will let you know a little bit about the interviewee for the morning. Of course, they will be looking at St. Lucia's contribution to the Montreal Protocol, the Kigali Amendment. Good morning to you, Cleopatra. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this morning's program on occasion of World Ozone Day. Happy World Ozone Day, Cleo.
Thank you, Jessie. As indicated, my name is Cleopatra Anthony from the Department of Sustainable Development. For this interview, I am joined by my colleague, Department of Sustainable Development Environment Officer, Keisha Jabatis. Keisha is also the focal point for the Montreal Protocol in St. Lucia, operating from the National Ozone Unit. Welcome, Keisha. Happy World Ozone Day today. We are not just commemorating World Ozone Day, but also the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol. Keisha, what is the significance of this treaty?
Good morning, Cleo, and good morning to our viewers who are also tuned in. As you mentioned, today we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. This international treaty was signed in 1987, and the purpose of this treaty is to phase out a group of substances that have been shown to cause damage to our ozone layer. These substances we call ozone depleting substances, and we use them almost every day. Well, we used to use them almost every day in our products such as air conditioners, refrigerators, and aerosols cans, and even in foam insulation. What the Montreal Protocol is about is regulating over 100 of those ozone depleting substances, and where all countries have come together and taken the initiative to phase out these substances and in an effort to preserve the ozone layer.
Thank you. The Montreal Protocol is regarded as one of the most successful environment treaties to date. Speak to us about the global milestones that have been achieved through this treaty that make it stand out.
So as I mentioned, the Montreal Protocol targets substances called ozone depleting substances. Popular ones are the chlorofluorocarbons, which we started phasing out in we phased out in St. Lucia in 2008, and we switched over to phasing out hydrochlorofluorocarbons. What the protocol has done is, to date, we have phased out almost 99% of ozone depleting substances, and this has put the ozone layer on the path to recovery.
Okay, so we have managed to phase out almost 99% of ozone depleting substances globally, largely through the CFC ban and the ongoing HCFC phase out. Tell us, what effect has this had on the ozone layer?
So because of the phase out efforts of all countries to limit or to reduce our use of ozone depleting substances, what the studies have shown is that the ozone layer is on the path to recovery and should be close to 1990 levels by the mid-century, by 2050. And what this does, it's helped to curb a lot of problems that we would have seen if we had not taken these efforts to phase out ozone depleting substances. As we know, this ozone depletion has negative impacts on humans and the environment. For example, because of increased UV exposure as a result of the depletion of the ozone layer, studies have shown that this can cause increased cases of skin cancers in humans. It can also cause increased eye cataracts, eye disease in humans, and also it has an effect on our plant and our marine life.
Wow, very interesting. St. Lucia ratified the Montreal Protocol in 1983. Can you speak to us about St. Lucia's activities and achievements for ozone recovery?
Okay, so since signing the Montreal Protocol in 1993, we have put together a program of activities, a group of projects that outline our overall strategy to phase out these substances. For example, we started out with the country program in 1995, and that targeted our phase out of CFCs, which I mentioned that we achieved in 2008, and I can say we did so ahead of our 2010 target. We also launched our hydrochlorofluorocarbon phase-out management plan, and this one targeted the other group of substances that I mentioned, which are ozone-depleting substances that we are phasing out right now. And our target for this phase-out is 2030. So we are also working to implement activities under the Kigali Amendment for the Montreal Protocol. And I must mention that St. Lucia has been very successful in our efforts to phase out HCFCs. For example, we had a target of a 35% reduction in HCFC consumption by 2015, and we are well ahead of this target. We are almost at our 2020 2025 target of a 65% reduction.
St. Lucia should be very proud because we have come very far, but still have far to go. So, what are the ongoing plans and future plans or targets for the National Ozone Unit?
Okay, so as we speak right now, Cleo, the National Ozone Unit is working towards the launch of our HCFC Phase-Out Management Plan, the HPMP, Stage 2, which will take us from 2021 to 2030. And this second phase of the HPMP builds on our efforts to achieve the 2030 phase-out target. And what we will be doing is continuing with training of technicians in refrigeration and air conditioning management practices. We are going to be engaging our stakeholders to, for example, our customs officers will be doing a lot of training of customs officers in the monitoring and the controlling the importation of ozone depleting substances. As I mentioned, what we have existing in St. Lucia is legislation to regulate the ozone depleting substances locally. And through this, we have a licensing and quota system, and we work with importers to ensure that they are complying with these requirements of the legislation.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned the hashtag HCFC free by 2030. How can the ordinary citizen be part of this effort?
We all use these substances in our refrigerators and our air conditioners. And as we are phasing out, one of the things we're promoting is the use of more ozone and climate-friendly refrigerants in our equipment. So what you can do as a consumer, an average consumer, is that when you're looking to purchase new air conditioners or refrigerators, you look out for the labels. You look out for equipment that is ozone friendly, that is HCFC free or CFC free. You also have to consider how you dispose of your old air conditioners and your refrigerators, because if you do not dispose of these substances in the right way, you risk venting of refrigerants in the atmosphere, leakages. Also consider who services your equipment. Make sure that you're using technicians who have been trained and certified, and that they're engaging in good practices when they're servicing your equipment. And there are cases where we don't even need to use air conditioners. We can make use of our natural ventilation. We can make use of proper designs of our buildings to let in more of our natural ventilation.
We have come to the end of this interview. Any final words?
Just want to wish everyone a happy World Ozone Day 2022. And also, as we are talking about the 35 years of the celebration of this Montreal Protocol and the successes that we have seen, just want to remind everyone that it takes the global community. As we saw, the Montreal Protocol is a shining example of what can happen when countries come together and collaborate, and that everyone is important in this fight to preserve our ozone layer and our climate.
Keisha Baptiste, Sustainable Development and Environment Officer, focal point for the National Ozone Unit. Thank you for sitting with me and providing insight to solutions about the effort to be free of ozone depleting and global warming substances in St. Lucia and the wider world through the Montreal Protocol. Back to our colleague Jessie.
Thank you so much, Cleo. That was just a wonderful interview, so insightful for the general public, for our viewers looking on now, wanting to learn a little bit more about World Ozone Day. Thank you so much, Cleo. Thank you, Keisha.
Thank you.
We have heard, throughout the week, we have been on the road, going to the various radio stations and to various groups to speak to them about World Ozone Day. And it has been sort of a learning experience for the team here at the Department of Sustainable Development. As much as we went out to share, we did get a lot of information from the general public as well. We really do appreciate your input, your your way in, and we will be taking that into consideration as we go forward into the HCFC phase-out management plan, that the second phase of which is being rolled out right now. We will be having the official launch, as Keisha indicated, and we will let the public know when that will be happening. So much information about World Ozone Day, so much information about the Montreal Protocol, but it is so significant and it is important for everyone, as many people as possible, to know and to be part of the movement that is recovery of the ozone layer. We have a special message from our Portfolio Minister, Honorable Sean Edward, Minister for Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, Vocational Training. He did leave us a message. Take a look at this first snippet.
Fellow St. Lucians, World Ozone Day, or the International Day for the Preservation of the Ozone Layer, has been observed annually since 1994 on the 16th of September, commemorating the 1987 signing of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Today, 35 years later, the tone of this observance has shifted from a grave call to action on safeguarding the world's protective layer to a celebration of the world's greatest environmental success story. A united global effort to phase out ozone-depleting substances means that presently the ozone layer is on the mend, proving that collective actions guided by science is the best way to solve major global challenges. After discovering ozone layer depletion in the 1970s, countries through the Montreal Protocol successfully phased out the production and the consumption of the main ozone offenders. First, they tackled a group of chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, of CFCs, and now the target is to phase out hydrochlorofluorocarbons, or HCFCs, by the year 2030. Back then, these ozone-depleting substances were found in almost everything from refrigerators and air conditioners to aerosol cans, insulating foams, and even the soles of our shoes. Presently, almost 99% of ozone-depleting substances have been phased out globally. By banning these substances, the Montreal Protocol also helped to reduce the impact of global warming, as some of these ozone-depleting substances were also powerful greenhouse gases. The government of St. Lucia ratified this amendment on November 2nd, 2021, and is currently putting measures in place to ensure that we meet the set targets. St. Lucia is proud of its phase-out achievements under the Montreal Protocol to help the ozone layer recuperate, and remains steadfastly committed to the Kigali Amendment global warming response. Protection of all living things on planet Earth from excessive ultraviolet radiation and higher temperatures means protecting the St. Lucian people, our way of life, our ecosystem, our island home. Happy World Ozone Day, everyone.
That was a quick excerpt there from the Minister, our Minister for Sustainable Development, Honorable Sean Edward, who's the overall Minister for Education, Sustainable Development, Innovation, Science, Technology, and Vocational Training, speaking there on the occasion of World Ozone Day. The Minister also touched on the Kigali Amendment and the St. Lucia's commitment toward this amendment of the protocol, toward reducing the consumption, production and consumption of HFCs here in St. Lucia. So thank you very much, Minister. Happy World Ozone Day to you as well. We continue the World Ozone Day special after this break with a special sit down with three gentlemen. We're talking the refrigerant transition and the environmental impact. Do stay with us.
Did you know that certain refrigerants found in air conditioners and refrigerators can be extremely harmful to the environment? Refrigerants can leak into the atmosphere from faulty or poorly maintained equipment, or when the equipment is improperly disposed of. Many refrigerants, such as chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, can damage the ozone layer, the important shield of gas that protects us from the sun's harmful UVB radiation. These refrigerants are known as ozone-depleting substances. Harmful radiation from the sun causes sunburn and has been linked to skin cancer and eye cataracts in humans. Some refrigerants are also powerful greenhouse gases, causing our Earth to get warmer. In fact, 1 kilogram of the refrigerant R22, commonly used in AC units, has the same greenhouse impact as almost 2 tons of carbon dioxide, which is the equivalent of running your car for 6 months. These are the reasons why St. Lucia has specific laws to regulate the importation of ozone-depleting substances and has committed to phasing out their use by 2030 through an international agreement called the Montreal Protocol. We all have a part to play in protecting the ozone layer and reduce global warming. Here are a few tips. Always hire a certified refrigeration and air conditioning technician to service your equipment. Ask him or her for their technician's ID card. Only importers approved by the National Ozone Unit who hold a valid import license can import refrigerants into St. Lucia. AC units and other equipment that use ozone-depleting substances are prohibited. Do not import them. Purchase ozone-friendly and energy-efficient refrigerators and AC units. Look for the labels. For more information, please contact the National Ozone Unit of the Department of Sustainable Development.
This message was brought to you by the Department of Sustainable Development, St. Lucia.
Thank you so much for staying tuned. For those of you just joining the live, we're so excited. We're thankful that you're joining us. Today is the World Ozone Day observance, 16th September 2022. We're not only observing World Ozone Day, but we're also celebrating 35 years of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. And if you were watching earlier, we had an interview with my colleagues from the Department of Sustainable Development, Ms. Keisha Jean-Baptiste and Ms. Cleopatra Anthony. And you got a rundown of St. Lucia's role as a collaborator in the Montreal Protocol. A lot of our successes, our achievements to date since St. Lucia ratified in 1993. Part of that, a significant part of that, is taking a look at the refrigerant sector here in St. Lucia. And so far we have crossed leaps and bounds, and we've had, I should say, a very accommodating refrigerant sector in this transition. We now come to the point in our program where we want to have a dialogue with experts in the field. We have on panel Mr. Bishnu Tulsi. He is not only a long-standing expert in the field of the phase-out, CFC phase-out, HCFC phase-out, but he currently holds the position of consultant for the HCFC phase-out management plan, and his years go way back to the point of the establishment of the National Ozone Unit here in St. Lucia. We'll be speaking to him a little bit more about that. We also have educator and president of the NARA, that is the National Air Condition and Refrigeration Association here in St. Lucia, Mr. Frederick Beausoleil. He is joined by his colleague, Vice President of the association, Mr. Mario Boyce. He's also a businessman in the field. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm so nervous to speak with you experts. Thank you all for being here, and we're happy World Ozone Day to you. We know it's a long journey to this point that we're coming upon. But before we get into the meat of things, I want us to start on the shore. Mr. Boyce, with you, if you could just tell us, what are refrigerants? We know that many of them have been ozone depleting. What are refrigerants? What are they made of? And what are they used for?
Well, let me just start, Jesse, by saying Happy Ozone Day to you as well. And your colleagues over from the ministry, champions for the ozone layer. Refrigerants really are a group of compounds, or should I say simple aliphatic fluorinated compounds made up of carbon and fluorine. They also there are also various types of refrigerants. There are many refrigerants, and they also contain hydrogen, bromine, and many other compounds making up those refrigerants. Refrigerants are really used in our everyday household appliances, and in some cases in commercial and industrial applications. And they really and truly are used in the heating or refrigeration cycle of some of those equipment. Because of the makeup and the structure, they're ideal for the equipment, say for example, the preservation of food or even our comfort cooling. We're sitting in the studio today, and the temperature is good compared to what we've experienced over the past weeks, and you probably would have heard probably your colleagues or friends out there complain how hot it is. So refrigerants make it possible for us to sit here in comfort and have this discussion. They go through equipment that extract heat in the environment, and heat is basically present at all temperatures, and they expel that heat on the outside. So refrigerants make it possible for us to have a comfortable day-to-day life. I don't know if I would have answered your question sufficiently. But in a nutshell, this really is what refrigerants are.
Okay. Speak to us about the range of impacts. What impact does it have on the environment, the ozone layer, and more specifically, I don't know if Mr. Beausoleil, you want to pick this question up, what qualifies a refrigerant as an ozone depleting substance?
Okay. Once again, good morning,
good morning.
To you, Jesse. I want to wish you Happy Ozone Day. Likewise, your colleagues, Mr. Tulsi, Mr. Boyce, and the rest of the viewing public. Yes, so as it relates to refrigerants and what would qualify a refrigerant as ozone depleting substance, it would have to be one which, and we're speaking in terms of molecules and atoms. What happens in the case of the chlorine atom tends to go after the ozone molecule. The ozone molecule is made up of 3 oxygen atoms, and as a result of the chlorine atom going in, it then basically extracts that ozone, one of the oxygen atoms from the ozone molecule, thus creating that problem in terms of what we have come to know as the ozone, the hole in the stratosphere.
So it's a destabilization at a molecular level.
Yeah.
Okay.
In many cases, when I lecture to my students, I try to give them the sense of a family, and where you find someone comes into the family, be it young lady, you find a young man comes in, causes interruption, young lady gets so much in love, decides to move out, only to find out there was really no love. Because what in fact happens is at some point, this very same chlorine atom will find itself just leaving this oxygen molecule, atom on its own and move away and continue destroying several other atoms. So from what we've learned, that in some cases you have as many as over 100,000 of those being destroyed. So it's a case where it has been significant in terms of the damage which was caused by chlorine. And the chlorine was mainly in two of the refrigerants, which one which is the CFC, which is R12, R11, which we banned way back since from 2008. And now as we're phasing down in terms of the hydrochlor HCFCs, we now find ourselves working towards that goal. So yes, so this pretty much is what has happened over the years. With
Understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Bosale. And I come to you now, Mr. Tulsi, because you have been orbiting the national move for the removal of substances that deplete the ozone layer from its inception. So speak to us a little bit about your role from the beginning, and give us paint a picture for us about what was happening. What was the impact of the Montreal Protocol initially when it just came out? We know the ozone hole was the trending topic of environment-wise in the 80s. Tell us what was happening at that time and what the Montreal Protocol did in terms of shaking things up.
Thanks, Jessie, and happy Ozone Day to everyone as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be involved from St. Lucia's initial work with the Montreal Protocol. What happened back in the 70s is that scientists found that these certain chemicals, and these are chemicals that will either have chlorine or bromine atoms, will drift into the upper atmosphere and do what Bosale explained. But the first time I've heard it explained in terms of family, which is quite interesting. Yeah. But that's really what it does, Yeah. So they drift up into the atmosphere, and they have long atmospheric life, up to 100 years. And once that was discovered, scientists then turned their attention to what would happen if the ozone layer got depleted, and they realized that it will mean that there will be increased ultraviolet radiation reaching the surface of the Earth. And research found that should that happen, a number of really unhappy things will take place. Skin cancer was mentioned. I think Keisha mentioned skin cancer, cataracts. The increased UV radiation could affect your DNA, and they cause mutations. It reduces crop production. It kills the planktons in the sea, which is the basis for the marine food chain. It destroys paints and pigments. So there's a range of impacts. And so the Montreal Protocol was negotiated, and the idea was to get rid of these substances. But doing it was easier said than done, of course. It had to be done in a way that will not interrupt economic activity, that will not interrupt society. So a phased and slow approach had to be taken. For example, a simple example is that if you buy a refrigerator, you should at least be able, with the Montreal Protocol, to use it to the end of its natural life, rather than having to get rid of it because you're phasing out the refrigerants. And let me add that it's not only refrigerants that cause ozone layer depletion. There's a range of substances that do this. Carbon tetrachloride is used in sterilization of medical equipment. You have halons in firefighting, aerosols in the hairspray, and these other things. So there are a number of substances, but all of these have been phased out already. That's why the focus now is only on refrigerants, because that's the main, So St. Lucia, I recall when the protocol, the parties to the protocol decided that we need each country must produce a national strategy, which Keisha mentioned. It's called your phase-out strategy. country program it was called, sorry, yeah. The first country program that was produced by a developing country was from St. Lucia, the very first. And UNEP did not know what to do with it because it was the first one the parties are receiving and they were struggling. So what do we do with this document? This is what St. Lucia says it wants to do. It took them 18 months to approve it. And there was a lot of back and forth. But we sort of set the tone for how the UNEP and the parties will deal with these country programs and the way the funding will flow into it. And so we sort of set the pace there. And like Keisha said earlier, we were able to phase out the first set CFCs 2 years ahead of the global schedule, which was really good. And then we moved into the HCFC phase out. You also asked about how this relates to St. Lucia's work, that is, relates to the global effort. Well, the thing is that it's all one and the same. The parties to the protocol take decisions. Those decisions have to be backed by science and research and development. So if you're going to phase out CFCs, you've got to find an alternative. So the protocol has its own science and technology panel that leads the global research into the alternatives. So it really is a complex arrangement that's there that I think other conventions can learn from.
Okay, another question for you, Mr. Tulsi. Briefly, just speak to us about the extent of St. Lucia's refrigerant consumption in 1993 when we ratified. What did it look like? What were we importing? What were we using in St. Lucia?
The main refrigerant back then was CFC, R11 and R12, and our use was about 9.3 tons. Okay. That use has grown in terms of refrigerant use, and no longer CFCs, but other refrigerants, to about 45 tons. So there's been rapid growth because there's a lot more refrigeration and air conditioning applications in the country.
Okay, understood. So the interventions of the Montreal Protocol are being regarded as something that needs to be studied for other environmental treaties. Speak to us about some of the interventions of the Montreal Protocol, and all of you, just looking back at what has been done in the last 35 years or so. What are some of the interventions that were done, which you think were effective and not so effective? Who's going to take on that one?
Well, I think to begin with, the intervention by the Montreal Protocol, I would hail it a success. And it's funny that 35 years has gone by so quickly. I remember when it was first being introduced, and practitioners in the field, some of them my seniors then, were not sure how to embrace it or what would become of our industry. But the intervention have brought in what I would call control, education, awareness in terms of technology available out there, in terms of making our work easier. So while, some persons may have been hesitant in the initial stages, the impact altogether was that of a positive one, because we saw the availability of equipment, even refrigerant identifiers. I mean, these things, when I started out, I couldn't remember, any one workshop having a refrigerant identifier. If you had this chemical in a tank, you would have to guess by smell. And, the amount of training that would have come from the initiative in terms of training technicians in the proper use and safe use of this equipment, especially even in the handling of refrigerants. One can walk into a room now and literally identify there's a leak based on the use of technology again. So all in all, we've had what I would consider a positive impact in terms of that intervention. And it was said earlier that when countries collaborate, great things happen. So it has all in all improved the standard of the industry. Okay, prior to basically what existed prior. So I would praise that initiative, and I mean I look forward to of course the initiative continuing, and you know, for great things to come as we get ready to take on the second phase of it. You know, and technicians themselves look forward to it as well, I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce.
Yeah,
Any
if I
input to
could
the-
add
yes.
to this, through the Montreal Protocol, one of the requirements based on our government signing on to the treaty, we were expected to establish a National Air Condition Association. And this is how this association came about. And if I may say, right here, it's interesting that we have Mr. Tulsi here, who is very much involved in the process, and now as is regarded as our godfather of the National Air Condition Association. And through the National Air Condition Association, we were able to collaborate with the Ozone unit and in terms of training. And over the earlier years, there was quite a bit of training which was done on island, through, again, collaborating with some of the other countries where we had other professors coming in to conduct some of those training for us in good refrigeration practices as well, and also the alternative refrigerants. On island, we have our local trainer, Mr. Michael Hart, who has over the years have been continuing to have done the training for the National Ozone Unit. That is conducted in most cases, I think, probably at least twice a year. It's something we're hoping that as time goes by, it could be increased, but again, funding has always been part of the issue. But all in all, through the Montreal Protocol, our technicians have been trained and certified. As a result, we have seen them come a long way. As Mr. Boyce indicated, some of our senior technicians, again, not being aware of what the impact would have been on their business, may have been a little resistant, but all in all, in the end, I think everybody came through to making it happen. And this, I think, is the result of why we were able to phase out 2 years earlier, because even with the suppliers, the retail outlets, they were able to, from a very early stage, stop the importation of any refrigerators with R12. And so as a result, that made a big difference in terms of the 2008.
Okay. And Mr. Tulsi, your consideration?
Yeah, there's so much there, but I just mentioned two things. In addition to the training of technicians and providing tools and equipment like the identifiers, the protocol also regulated the production of these chemicals. So whether it's Brazil or Venezuela or Japan or whichever country are producing these ozone depleting substances, the protocol will set quotas and reduce those quotas to zero over time. So on the demand side, the refrigeration technicians are reducing the use, but in the supply side, the protocol is also forcing a change. So that it is the two things work hand in hand, and they time things in such a way that the rate at which the supply is decreasing is mirrored by the rate at which the demand is also decreasing, so that the consumer is not suffering. And while they do that, then you have the equipment manufacturers, because they are now not getting the refrigerant they're accustomed to using. The protocol will actually pay for the change over of that manufacturer's operations, will meet the cost of doing it. There was at the time, at the beginning, there was an assembly operation in St. Lucia that was putting together CFC refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. And we got funding from the protocol to retool it. But the company went out of business before we were able to get it done, because it was cheaper to import it than to assemble locally. I wouldn't call the company's name, but it's an example. But the protocol has spent millions and millions of dollars shifting manufacturing operations in developing countries. So it's really a holistic approach that the protocol and the parties have fashioned to achieve this success.
Okay. From a commercial standpoint, we're running out of time, but I just want to touch on, I got a question earlier this week during a radio program. We moved from CFCs to HCFCs to HFCs. I mean, are we shifting the goalpost from problem to problem? But we here know that the ultimate goal is we're moving towards natural refrigerants. Yeah. Speak to us about the opportunities that are being presented through this type of transition for the sector in St. Lucia.
Well, if I may, one, the transition brings to the fore new technology. And Keisha was making the case a little earlier in terms of the awareness or customers being aware of what they purchase in terms of labeling and what have you. But this has brought on board inverter technology, which is also working very well in those new refrigerants. Okay, and I consider it a win-win situation because I know of many households possibly who would not have considered air conditioning before, just because of the cost of energy in St. Lucia. And those new technologies has made it quite possible now, considering that you could have an efficient unit running almost at the cost of running a house fan. And you could actually be saving. I mean, we look at the technology in both air conditioning and household refrigerators. We've seen, of course, you made mention earlier on about we moving altogether to natural refrigerants like hydrocarbons. We see a lot of those coming now in refrigerators, and the energy consumption is what is great. Yeah. One should be aware of those benefits in purchasing appliances for home. So it has really impacted. It has brought along new technology. It has also brought along new opportunities for training, because as the technology change, and one who would want to stay abreast as what is happening in the industry would seek training. You understand? So it's a broad scope in terms of the change. I mean, they say change is good. Sometimes we intimidated by it, but then looking back at it now, as to the appliances that one would have had at home, even the air conditioning, that you would have at home, the equipment, and commercial equipment as well, because it's across the sector. The industry has benefited in that. Yeah.
So the shifting of the goalposts, right, Mr. Boyce? What is technology moving quick enough for the demand?
I would say so. I would say so, and I would not consider it. I mean, of course, you would have the critics who would always tend to say, well, okay, if today it's one thing, tomorrow it's another. But then, with every change, opportunities arise, and the alternative that is being offered is always better than what existed. I mean, you may speak to some people, and they may say to you that it's a myth. I think, that was even held by a US leader in terms of saying, there's no issue with the ozone. But I say to persons that we know we breathe in oxygen. We are told that. Okay, I mean, we breathe in oxygen. If this is not available, we would be dead. I mean, one can only imagine it. So I say to them, ozone exists. The ozone layer exists. It gives us the comfort that we enjoy in walking about the streets or going to the beach. I remember there was this incident at the landfill when it used to be in the Cicero area, and some tires got fire. It was black smoke pluming into the air. Only in another part of the island, we had black rain. So I use those examples, and I tell them that, this thing is not a myth, it's real. I mean, we really need to practice safe and sustainable efforts in terms of what we do every single day. So I would not say it's a change of the goalpost. It presents new opportunities. Many of us has benefited from those opportunities, and we continue to see the benefits.
I'd like to add to that, if you don't mind, Jesse, because that was really the explanation from the technical side. But we also have to understand the shifting from one gas to the next, from the political side and from the way the parties were negotiating. Okay. Under the protocol, there was a fixed line that this change must happen in a way that will not affect society, that will not interrupt the provision of air conditioning and refrigeration services to the public or to industry or whatever. That was a constant. So we were using CFCs at the time, which has an ozone depleting potential of 1 and climate global warming potential of about 10,000, meaning it's 10,000 times more dangerous than carbon dioxide. So while they were phasing out the CFCs, they had to find something that's better, but will still provide the cooling services. They went to HCFCs, which has a lower ozone depleting potential, in fact of 0.055 instead of 1. So it is much lower, and a global warming potential of 1,710. So they went to this new gas, HCFCs, which is better for the ozone and better for the climate. But that said, it still has a small amount of ozone depleting potential, and it still had a climate impact. So they've got to look for something that will first deal with the ozone issue, because the Montreal Protocol is first and foremost about ozone. So HFCs were introduced, which have 0 ozone depleting potential, which makes them ideal. But they still have some global warming potential. Somewhere, there are many HFCs, the global warming potential range from about 625 to 4,400. So depending on which one you use. So the transition is now to HFCs, remembering the fixed goalpost, refrigeration and air conditioning services to the world must not be interrupted. Now under the Kigali Amendment, they are going to go to gases now that replace the HFCs with gases that have 0 ozone depleting potential and 0 or near 0 global warming potential. And I think that is going to be the final transition. And it is interesting, the Kigali Amendment came out of that concern that while we were dealing with the ozone problem, there was still some impact on the climate. The impact was decreasing because the gases have lower and lower climate and global warming potential. But the idea was to make it 0. And so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was tasked with finding a way to protect the ozone layer and the global climate system. And they did a report, which I happen to be one of the lead authors for, on how we could address both problems at the same time.
Understood.
Okay, 2 things just to add to what was being discussed in terms of the goalpost. Just to finish off part of what Mr. Toos explained, in that as it relates to some of the new refrigerants that we are looking into, for example, R290 and 600, what is concerning for some of our technicians is the fact that it could be flammable, and even in some cases for the general public. Now, this is why the training aspect is critical. And even as Ms. Jabatis mentioned earlier, the importance of the general public being aware as to who that they would engage in servicing their equipment, because an untrained technician can come into your home or into your office, conduct a service for you, and you could find yourself in problems, right? Because there are certain procedures that the technician would need to follow on the training guide. So that is very important.
Okay, and final question from me. Speaking of 0 ultimately, we're looking to be HCFC free by 2030. St. Lucia has so far achieved 35% reduction in consumption by 2020. What will it take? Is this a feasible goal, you think, Mr. Tulsi, Mr. Beausoleil, for 2030?
I see no reason why not. Based on our experience with the CFCs and with the interest of our technicians, and hopefully that we continue the training that we have been doing in the past, I see no reason why not.
Okay.
Well, the reality is that importers are no longer bringing them in.
That's the other thing today.
Okay, so the equipment that is in stock when their natural life comes to an end, then that's
That'll
the
be
end of
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing is most of the technicians, they say to you, they're not able to find any of those R22 systems when they go out to do any of the service. It's just one or two. Because even when I've asked some of my students to do research, it's a challenge for them to find R22 system. You know,
Wow.
so it's good news. You know.
Yeah.
Okay. And final question on HCFC demand reduction intervention slated under the second phase of the HPMP. Has the industry identified how it can collaborate on this second phase? I know you alluded to it, Mr. Boyce, earlier, including the plan to establish a reclamation center for these appliances.
Well, I think Mr. Tulsi might be able to speak to that, but
Okay.
again, I could also speak to it, but I prefer for Mr. Tulsi
Yeah,
to
okay.
speak to it.
The reclamation center first. Like Bosole was saying, the new refrigerants, some of them are flammable. In the past, when we were dealing with refrigerants that were not flammable, someone comes to your home or takes a piece of equipment into a workshop, they release the gas. Now, if the gas you're releasing is flammable, you are setting yourself up for an accident. So recovery will have to become part of the health and safety aspect of the refrigeration and air conditioning service sector. That is why the National Ozone Unit felt that they need this center, because if you're going to recover all this gas, what do you do with it? You put it through a process where it's cleaned and then it could be reused, which will then reduce demand for new refrigerants coming into the country. But the overall strategy that the National Ozone Unit has worked since the CFC phase out, and it's really repeating a lot of that, which is training of the technicians, training of the customs officers, provision of the tools and equipment, etc.
Okay. Understood, Mr. Boyce.
Yeah, but I just want to just pick up a little on what Mr. Tulsi was saying earlier in terms of flammability. And my colleague, Mr. Bosole here. And that is one of the concerns that I've had from clients and persons interested in replacing refrigerators, well, more or less on the domestic side. Those appliances that are using those flammable refrigerants, I must add that these are completely redesigned appliances in terms of, well, more so against their predecessors. Switches, any part that would, which would emit an arc, has been somewhat enclosed and put on the outside of the refrigerator. Okay, compared to it being in the cabin or the storage areas of the
Eliminating the dangers,
eliminating or minimizing any danger. Secondly, the amount of refrigerant that is in that appliance is very little.
About 30%,
Okay,
yeah.
very, very little. So, and if it were to have escaped in the environment, or for example, any form of combustion, it would simply just burn out before it could be a threat to the household or the occupants of the house. So a lot of persons are of the impression that it would be a large amount of things, refrigerant in it. I mean, take for example, you cook every day on LPG. This is a hydrocarbon, and it's been with us for hydrocarbons has been with us for a very long time. It's not new. And we have far more liquid in that tank that we're cooking, or we have it in the cupboard.
Than an appliance.
Or 100 pounds in the outside of your home. The danger is far greater than the amount of refrigerant which is in your
It's
your
about 10
plants.
grams.
Exactly. And I'm saying with that comes the benefit that I said earlier in terms of the consumption of energy. So there's more benefits, to the consumer having those appliances at home rather than the worry of, yeah.
One last thing to just finish off, in terms of the reclamation center. The good news is Grenada has just launched and have set up their own system out there. And so I'm hopeful that we will at some point be able
Take a
to
page.
do that, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. We've run out of time for this segment. It
That's
has been
okay.
very interesting, insightful, talking about the refrigerant transition here in St. Lucia, its impact on the environment. Thank you very much, Mr. Tulsi, Mr. Beausoleil, Mr. Boyce. We really do appreciate your time, and I'm hopeful that we can make this an ongoing engagement where we just look at updates, engagement with the technicians and so on within the industry.
Yeah.
Thank you once again.
Well,
We continue with the broadcast special. We are live on air talking about World Ozone Day, the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol, just wrapping up another engagement. Do stay tuned. We have more on this on the other end of this break.
CFCs, HCFCs, HFCs. 3 types of fluorocarbon gases have been widely used in refrigeration. Now, HFOs are joining HFCs as the fluorocarbon gases of choice for a wide range of applications. The 4 fluorocarbon gases have very different environmental properties. Let's first look at CFCs. They were invented in the 1930s as a replacement of toxic or highly flammable refrigerants. CFCs were safe, but it was later discovered that because the molecule was very stable in the atmosphere, they reached the ozone layer, where they would break down, and the chlorine of the CFC molecule would deplete the ozone, especially over Antarctica. After the hole in the ozone layer was discovered in the 1980s, industry took action, and countries signed the 1987 Montreal Protocol, leading to the phase out of CFCs. CFCs were quickly replaced by HCFCs that contain hydrogen, which made them less stable in the atmosphere, so they could break down more quickly. But they also needed to be phased out to allow the ozone layer to fully recover. We needed to find a refrigerant that did not contain chlorine, yet had some properties of CFCs and HCFCs, non-flammable, with low toxicity and good technical performance. Enter HFCs, fluorocarbons that could be readily produced and applied and had no impact on the ozone layer. It was known that HFCs had a global warming potential because they can accumulate in the atmosphere, but it was still lower than that of CFCs. Therefore, a lot of emphasis was put on secure containment so the gases could be recycled and emissions reduced compared to CFCs. HFCs are excellent refrigerants. They are safe and energy efficient, which is key for refrigeration. Leaks and improper handling led to HFCs released in the atmosphere, now responsible for about 1% of global warming. A new solution was needed, and HFOs were developed. They offer similar properties to HFCs and are suitable for use in many refrigeration and air conditioning applications. HFOs offer excellent energy efficiency and have a low global warming potential because they break down in the atmosphere in a few days. However, for some applications, HFOs are not suitable, and HFCs, or HFO-HFC blends, with a lower global warming potential are being implemented. Just like many other things in life, refrigerants have evolved as research and innovation enabled solutions to be found to make refrigerants safer, more energy efficient, and to limit their impact on the environment.
We talk a lot about the danger of climate change, but climate action is not always easy to achieve. A new era in climate action began on the 1st of January 2019. Implementation of the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol started then. Nations that agreed on the amendment will reduce the use of climate warming gases called HFCs in refrigerators and air conditioners by more than 80% over the next 30 years. This measure will help to avoid up to 0.4 degrees Celsius of global warming this century while continuing to protect the ozone layer. It contributes to reaching the global temperature targets, and it can work if it's fully supported and implemented. Preventing global warming is an extremely difficult task that will take a lot of time. The Kigali Amendment is one solution that's here already right now. Each nation has the power to bring the world closer to the climate goal by ratifying the Kigali Amendment. This is our chance to take action.
Thank you so much for staying tuned. For those of you watching on air online, thank you so much. We are celebrating World Ozone Day 2022 on this Friday, the 16th of September 2022. We're also celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Now, if you're just joining us, I'm going to give you a brief history. Back in 1985, we were already alerted that there was a hole in the ozone layer. The Vienna Convention happened, and 2 years later in 1987 we had the Montreal Protocol created. St. Lucia and all the other countries, there was universal ratification, the first treaty of its kind in that sense, universal ratification of the Montreal Protocol. In 1993, St. Lucia ratified, and all these years later, we have been able to successfully phase out CFCs in St. Lucia and the rest of the world, and we're now in the process of phasing out HCFCs, another harmful chemical to the ozone layer. We're on the road, HCFC free by 2030. Hashtag it as much as possible for all your posts today for World Ozone Day. And just want to let you know that our social media are live on the Government of St. Lucia Facebook Live. It is ablaze with Did You Knows and special giveaways. We want to give away some packages to our viewers who've been listening and learning so much about the ozone layer and the Montreal Protocol intervention. We have come to the point in our program, our live special today, where we want to talk a little bit about an activity and a move by the United Nations Environment Program to get Gen Z in on the Montreal Protocol movement. And it is a mobile game called Reset Earth. And St. Lucia has been doing a lot of work promoting it as much as possible for many years now, for a couple years now. And we recently had a summer activity. It was a movie and games day, very competitive spirit among adolescents here in St. Lucia at the Mount Cuba Real Estate. We were able to engage the kids, have them learn a little bit about the Montreal Protocol and some friendly competition, and many of them walked away with some techie prizes. One of the coordinators, and I say that very comfortably when I say coordinator of that event, was our intern at the National Ozone Unit, Miss Dana Murray. And she was able to, lead the charge in many respects for organizing this event for her peers. Could you believe it? So I've had her here come on, sit on the platform to be able to speak to us a little bit about the Reset Earth movie and game, as well as the event that she was instrumental in planning this past summer, which was very successful. Hey Dana, what's up?
Hi Jessie, I'm nervous.
Happy World Ozone Day.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So just tell us a little bit about yourself. How old are you? You're an intern at the Department of Sustainable Development. That's an awesome thing to awesome opportunity. Tell us, how old are you? What did you study? I know you went to Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
My name is Dana Marie. I am 18 years old and I studied environmental studies and climate change at Sir Arthur Lewis.
So that's right up your alley.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. So tell us a little bit about your experience interning at the Department of Sustainable Development. The National Ozone Unit was not your first stop.
No, first when I got to the department, I was under climate change, but I also got, I was also briefed on the different projects and work program areas at the department, including the National Ozone Unit. And then I learned about the Montreal Protocol, Kigali Amendment, refrigerants, that phasing out process and everything. And they also showed me the Reset Earth movie as well as the game. They told me about the game.
Okay, so you've learned a lot about the movie and the game. Tell us a little bit about it. What is it trying? What is the message essentially? And where can we access this game? Where can we watch this movie?
So the movie is available on YouTube. It's called Reset Earth. And basically it takes place in the future. And well, what happened if we didn't stop ozone depletion? So it's
It's essentially what would happen if we had not created the Montreal Protocol.
Basically, yes, what happened.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit.
And the game can be found on Google Play. It's also called Reset Earth, and it's similar to the movie, but it's in levels. So you would play basically to stop ozone depletion as well.
Okay, so I know the target for UNEP was really Gen Z, young people, but essentially anybody can play this game, right?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I didn't get past the first level, but it is for everyone. Everyone can play.
You didn't get past the first level. You're not the only one. We know many people, it's very challenging for them to get used to, you know, even, I mean, a lot of gamers think the side-scroll gaming is very basic, but it can be challenging for many people. But it wasn't for a lot of your peers at the summer event that we hosted. So tell us a little bit about that activity and your role in it all.
Okay, well, during the registration process, I sent out a link basically asking the students like how much they knew, because even me, I didn't know much about ozone depletion as well. So just to get a feel as to, you know, what they knew before coming into the activity. They knew quite a bit. It actually shocked me, to be honest. But I also told them to download the game so that they would also have practice. And they came ready to play. Like one of them, literally the winner of our activity, he beat the entire game within like 10 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really good.
Wonderful. So what's the reception? You spoke a little bit about the before. What is the after? What did they say?
After, I realized, I also sent a evaluation form after as well, and they had quite a bit to say. A lot of it was like paragraphs. Like before they had like one little thing to say, but after they had like paragraphs.
You're talking about teenagers here?
Yes. 15. The target age was 15 to 20. And yeah, they really showed me what they learned in that form, and honestly, I'm really happy.
Wonderful. So tell us, what are your hopes going forward in terms of your experience at the Department of Sustainable Development? What are your future plans?
I do not.
to continue learning at the department?
Yes, I do plan to continue learning. I really hope to get more experience in at the ozone unit too, because I mean it has piqued my interest. And honestly, even at the department as well, I think that there's always opportunities to learn, not just at the ozone unit, but also under climate change, biodiversity, and oceans, science and technology, and the projects as well.
Nice, wonderful. So thank you very much, Dana, for that insight on the Reset Earth and our activity that you essentially, I dare to say that you spearheaded, because you were in every source, you know, when it came to the planning of this summer activity for your peers, which is really, really quite commendable. So thank you very much, Dana. And just to give you a little bit more insight as to what the Reset Earth movie is, it's a video series. You could go on to YouTube and see the entire thing. And also you could download on Android or on the App Store, the Reset Earth mobile game. It's a side-scroll game. It's very easy for those of you who've been gaming on your PS4s and your Xboxes for years. It's very fun, and you can learn a lot about the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Take a look at this video to give you some insight as to what you can expect.
This is what happens when you leave the world in the hands of people who don't care about the planet. Not much to look at, right? I mean, yeah, what did you think it would look like? We grew up on stories that it's linked to the smog in the air, but anyone who actually knows the answer is long dead, and we're stuck with the skin disease that we call the grow.
Okay, that's a bit depressing.
Smog, the grow, it's all true.
Are we doing this thing or what?
Let's do this.
Reset Earth, the movie, the game. Download it now to learn more about the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. Get it for your kids so that they can learn through fun. Yeah, this is the World Ozone Day live special. We're having so much fun today. Do stay tuned. When we come back, unfortunately, our final segment.
Humans lie in the bright sunshine, but its rays are all of the friendly kind. UVA rays age the skin, UVB rays burn it, but just in case you thought it was all bad news, ultraviolet light makes vitamin D in him, in her, in me, in you too. It isn't just humans that have to take care of ultraviolet traveling through space and air. We phytoplankton living in the sea for photosynthesis need UV, but too much bleach is out of green and damages our DNA. Yes, we've been having a hard time for many years, but now let's celebrate, whoop and cheer, that big Antarctic ozone hole is healing now thanks to the Montreal Protocol. Healing thanks to the Montreal Protocol. Healing thanks to the protocol. We're delightful, fighting fit, floating phytoplankton, living in the big wet sea. Tiny, mighty, thronging, thriving, feisty phytoplankton, dancing nature's choreography. You naughty humans sprayed ozone depleting stuff, such as chlorofluorocarbons, into the air enough to interfere with ozone that shields Earth from UV rays. But international action has succeeded in reversing ozone's decay. Hooray, hooray, hooray! We're delightful, fighting fit, floating phytoplankton, living in the big wet sea. Tiny, mighty, thronging, thriving, feisty phytoplankton, dancing nature's choreography. UV radiation splits molecules in stratosphere. O2 oxygen divides, quickly recombines, but here, 1 in every 500,000 ends up as ozone. O3, the conquering hero, from UV shields our planetary home. His home, her home, my home, your home, everybody's home. We're life's foundation food. We phytoplankton down at the bottom of the food chain. And now the ozone hole is healing. We're feeling fitter, so once again, we're delightful, fighting fit, floating
you so much for staying tuned. As I said earlier, unfortunately, we've come to the final segment of our broadcast special, live on air at the GIS studios. It's World Ozone Day 2022. A wonderful start this morning to the celebration also of the 35th anniversary of the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. I'd like to thank you so much for watching this morning. Don't forget to check out the comments because we have opportunities for you to win exciting prizes. We also want you to follow us on social media on our Facebook page, Department of Sustainable Development St. Lucia, as well as our Instagram. It's at SUSDEVSLU, SUSDEVSLU. Follow us for updates not only on the National Ozone Unit activities, but all of the work program areas of the Department of Sustainable Development. Happy World Ozone Day. I just want to invite Ms. Keisha Jabatiste, who is the focal point for the Montreal Protocol here in St. Lucia, to give final words before we close off. Keisha?
Thank you, Jessie. I think we had a little bit too much fun on set today. And thank you to our viewers who tuned in and watched our live special. I hope that you guys got to learn a bit about what we do at the National Ozone Unit and the Montreal Protocol and all our efforts in phasing out ozone-depleting substances and securing a healthy ozone layer and protecting all life on Earth. Just want to remind you to look out for the launch of our HCFC Phase-Out Management Plan Stage 2. It's coming up towards the end of in October, and we would be launching this project and talking about what we're continuing to do in terms of training of our technicians, the revisions that we're currently making to our legislation to enable us to implement the Kigali Amendment to phase out HFCs. Happy World Ozone Day, and thank you very much for joining.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Keisha. It's been a pleasure being on here, letting you in on this wonderful movement that St. Lucia is a collaborator on, the Montreal Protocol. Happy World Ozone Day. Let's all say it together on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Happy World Ozone Day. Do enjoy. My name is Jessie Leon, signing off for now. Do stay tuned for more NTN programming. Goodbye. Well, that's all right.
We are facing an existential crisis.
Unlike anything the world has ever seen.
We need to take action.
Everyone has to stand up.
The warning is not a new one.
Our world faces a triple planetary crisis of climate change, natural loss, and pollution.
For generations, humanity, often without realizing it, has been destroying the natural world. In the name of progress, we have polluted the Earth's oceans, chopped down its forests, and clouded its skies. Today, nature and our own survival rest on a knife's edge.
It's time to ratchet up the action that we need to have at the country level.
The United Nations Environment Programme was established with one goal in mind: to unite the world in saving our planet.
It is clear that the environmental crisis which is confronting the world will profoundly alter the future destiny of our planet.
For 5 decades, UNEP has used science and its mandate to bring the world together to help nations find solutions to grave environmental threats.
What is this pollution that we have heard so much about?
The Mediterranean is sick. It's being poisoned slowly but steadily for those who need it most.
The 1970s found a world grappling with an unprecedented crisis of pollution. Could the seemingly irreparable damage be undone? UNEP inspired the world to take action, preventing oil spills and toxic discharge by ships, uniting 143 coastal states to limit ocean pollution and save marine life, reducing air pollution and ending the scourge of acid rain. But soon, the world would face its biggest environmental challenge yet.
The destruction of the ozone layer on a global scale is no longer just a theory. The hole over the Antarctica is no longer an isolated seasonal phenomenon.
If the breach continued to grow, the planet would suffer lethal levels of ultraviolet radiation, harming human health, biodiversity, and climate. In 1987, UNEP facilitated the Montreal Protocol. Over 30 countries agreed to phase out the production of almost 100 ozone-depleting substances. The protocol remains one of the greatest achievements of multilateralism.
All nations gathered here can be proud of what we have achieved.
This success set the tone for a series of powerful accords, limiting the movement of toxic waste across borders, protecting the Earth from dangerous, long-lasting chemicals, and restricting the international trade in mercury. Most recently, in 2021, UNEP finished a 2-decade-long campaign to rid the world of highly toxic leaded petrol, saving an estimated 1 million lives each year. As the world grappled with pollution and waste, another crisis was brewing.
I have dreamt of seeing the great herds of wild animals, jungles and rainforests, full of birds and butterflies. But now I wonder if they will even exist for my children to see.
Poaching and habitat loss were pushing some of the world's most iconic animals to the brink of extinction. Driven by science, UNEP supported a series of international treaties, limiting and in some cases banning the trade of endangered species, safeguarding migratory animals, expanding protected areas, and increasing financing for biodiversity protection. The seminal Earth Summit in Brazil introduced the idea of sustainable development.
This is an historical moment for the mobilization of all peoples of the world.
Over the last 5 decades, UNEP has helped more than 100 countries enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions and produced scientific studies to guide member states in their decision-making. In 2012, a new international body was established to provide scientific data on biodiversity in a joint effort from UNEP and other UN organizations. In 2019, it found that 1 million species face the threat of extinction, underscoring the urgency to act.
Every action we take alters the earth that future generations will inherit.
The world is starting to recognize the effects of planetary warming, but UNEP began sounding the alarm 3 decades ago. As early as 1988, UNEP and the World Meteorological Organization launched the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. For over 30 years, IPCC science has helped member states counter climate change, earning the body a Nobel Prize for its work. UNEP-backed studies have informed some of the planet's most crucial climate accords. These include a 1992 agreement that set a template for curbing greenhouse gas emissions, followed by the Kyoto Protocol and the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement.
I'm proud to announce that 175 parties have signed the Paris Agreement.
UNEP has also mobilized 450 banks, insurers and investors to help create a more sustainable world.
We don't want fossil fuels anymore.
A lot has happened in the last 50 years, but it's the next 10 that will be pivotal for life on this planet.
But in fact, what you and I and other ordinary people around the world can do will not by itself save the natural world. The great decisions, the great disasters that face us can only be dealt with by governments. And that's why this organization is so important.
Over the past 50 years, we've seen when the world decides to act, the world comes together to act. Together with member states and partners, we've achieved a lot. But now is the time to truly make that lift for humanity and to do much more and much faster. And I have every reason to be hopeful. As an organization grounded in science, UNEP will do everything in its power to push for breakthroughs. Our planet and humanity depends on us. Together, we can build a greener and safer and fairer world for all.